You already know how this story ends. Jesus is coming. Lazarus is about to walk out of that tomb alive. Everyone in the crowd is about to witness a miracle. So why does Jesus stop right before the greatest resurrection of his ministry and weep? This is one of the shortest verses in the entire Bible. 2 words in English. Jesus wept. But those 2 words carry more weight than almost anything else written in the Gospels. And most people read straight past them without asking the one question that actually matters. If Jesus knew he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead, why did he cry? To understand this moment, you have to go back 4 days earlier. Lazarus was sick. His sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus immediately. They lived in Bethany, a small village less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, close enough that news could travel fast. And Jesus received that message. He knew his friend was dying. Yet the Gospel of John records something strange. Jesus stayed exactly where he was for 2 more days. Why would he wait? In first-century Jewish culture, death and mourning followed strict customs. The body was typically buried within hours, sometimes on the same day, because of the region's heat. Mourners would gather for 7 days of intense grief, known as Shiva, followed by 30 days of lighter mourning. There was also a common belief, reflected in later rabbinic writings, that the soul lingered near the body for 3 days before departing completely. By the time Jesus arrives in Bethany, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. Past the point anyone expected recovery. Past the point of doubt. The delay wasn't neglect, it was intentional. When Jesus finally reaches Bethany, Martha meets him first. Her words are raw. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Not an accusation exactly, but close. A grief mixed with faith, and maybe a little bit of confusion about why he took so long. Jesus responds with one of his most direct declarations in Scripture. "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die." This isn't abstract theology to Martha. It's standing right in front of her. Then Mary comes. She falls at his feet, same words as her sister. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And this time, something shifts in Jesus. John describes him as deeply moved in spirit and troubled. The Greek word used here, embrimaomai, is intense. It doesn't just mean sadness. Some scholars translate it closer to a kind of controlled anger or deep emotional agitation. Whatever it wasn't calm. He asks where they've laid Lazarus. They lead him to the tomb. And then it happens. Jesus wept. Here's where the question becomes unavoidable. Biblical scholar N.T. Wright has pointed out that this moment captures something theologians have wrestled with for centuries: the tension between Jesus knowing the outcome and Jesus feeling the loss in real time. He wasn't performing grief for the crowd. He wasn't pretending not to know what was coming. He was fully present in the pain of the people standing in front of him, even while holding the power to undo that pain moments later. Think about what that means. Jesus wasn't crying because he didn't know if Lazarus would live again. He knew. He'd already said as much to his disciples before they even left for Bethany. He was crying because death itself is wrong, because watching the people he loved suffer was unbearable to him, even with the resolution seconds away. Grief and power weren't in conflict. They existed in the same moment. This matters more than it might seem at first, because it tells you something about how God responds to human pain. Not from a distance, not with a clinical, detached plan that skips over the hard part. Jesus stood at that tomb and let himself feel the full weight of loss, even as the greatest miracle of his ministry was about to unfold. New Testament historian Craig Keener has written extensively about the cultural expectations surrounding public mourning in this period. Loud weeping, professional mourners, and open displays of grief were completely normal, even expected, at Jewish funerals. So when the crowd sees Jesus crying, they read it exactly the way you'd expect. "See how he loved him," they say. But then, almost immediately, some in the crowd turn skeptical. Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? The same tears that moved some people to compassion pushed others toward doubt. Isn't that familiar? How the exact same evidence can lead two people to completely opposite conclusions. Jesus arrives at the tomb. It's a cave, sealed with a stone, exactly how burial sites in that region were typically constructed. He tells them to remove the stone. Martha, ever practical, warns him about the smell. 4 days in a warm climate tomb wasn't subtle. This detail matters. John includes it specifically so no one could later claim Lazarus was only unconscious or that this was some kind of staged event. The text wants you to know, without question, that this man was thoroughly, unmistakably dead. Jesus prays, thanking God aloud, not for himself, but so the crowd standing there would understand what they were about to witness came from God. Then he calls out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" And the man who had been dead for 4 days walks out of the tomb, still wrapped in the burial cloths. Jesus tells them to unbind him and let him go. Archaeological work in the region of Bethany, including studies referenced by researcher Jody Magnus on 1st century Judean burial practices, has confirmed the kind of rock-cut tomb described in this account was standard for the area and time period, sealed by a large stone rolled across the entrance. The physical details in John's account line up precisely with what we know of how burial actually worked in that culture. This wasn't a vague or symbolic story. It was rooted in the exact customs of the world it describes. So why does this moment matter to you, right now, in whatever you're carrying? Because the tears came first, before the miracle, before the resolution, before anyone knew how the story would end, even though Jesus already did. He didn't rush past the grief to get to the good part. He sat in it. He let it be real. And only then did he move toward what he'd already planned to do. Maybe you're waiting on something right now. Maybe it feels like whatever you prayed for has been delayed too long, past the point where you expected an answer. Maybe you've said some version of what Martha and Mary said. If you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. Here's what's easy to miss. Jesus didn't wait those 2 extra days because he stopped caring. He waited because something bigger than a healing was coming. A sick man made well would have been a kindness. A dead man walking out of his own tomb was a declaration. Sometimes what feels like delay is actually God building towards something your current situation isn't big enough to hold yet. The story of Lazarus doesn't promise that pain gets skipped. It shows the opposite. Jesus stood in the middle of loss and grief and let himself feel every bit of it, even while holding the power to change the outcome. The miracle didn't erase the tears. The tears came first, and they made the resurrection mean more, not less. You already know how this story ends, but maybe you don't know yours yet. And if Jesus could weep at a tomb he was about to empty, he can sit with you in whatever you're standing in front of right now, long before you ever see how it ends. Thank you for watching. Let's continue the conversation in the comment section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. Till next time.